Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of our Margaret Chase Smith Library interview series for the summer, which technically is going to be for the fall now as well. As you typically know that you usually see my boss, Dr. David Richards, the executive director of the library. He's usually the one conducting these interviews, but he has asked me to reach out to a few alumni of NHD, teachers and students alike, to talk about the program, since I am the state coordinator for National History Day in the state of Maine. For those of you that do not know, National History Day in Maine is a widely known program in the state, but it's also part of a larger program nationally and even internationally. And it's a program that encourages students to do independent research on a variety of historical topics. And they do then present the work to professionals in the field. And it can be presented as an exhibit, a website, paper, website, or performance. And today we are speaking with an alum from National History Day in Maine. Her name is Avery Arena, and she graduated from Gorham High School in 2017. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes. And she was very successful in the program, and she's actually was in the program longer than I've been around, actually, I think. So when I first started. So I started in 2014 as the state coordinator here in Maine, and she had already done a couple of contest seasons before that. And so I think I came in the last 3 seasons that she participated. So she participated from 6th grade all the way through sophomore year, correct? And I believe you did all exhibits?
All exhibits.
All exhibits. So we'll definitely be asking some questions about exhibit making to you here in a little bit. But I think there was also a theme every year, right? Yeah, I think you.
It was, yeah.
Yes.
I was very interested in animal welfare and animal rights, and also hated being boring. So I decided to find the most obscure niche topics I could find in animal welfare every year, which definitely led me down some interesting paths, and also made my exhibits stand out every year.
They sure did. I do actually remember seeing the first year that I moved to Maine. I was a volunteer judge, so I wasn't even the state coordinator yet. I was just volunteering judging, and I do remember judging your exhibit in the final round. I think it was over frog dissection, right?
Yeah, it had a big giant picture of a dissected frog in the middle, which made it pretty hard to miss.
Yes, yes. And so, yeah, we'll definitely talk about how and why you decided to on some of these topics. Obviously, we know that you are interested in animal rights, but it's how you tie it into the theme. Because the way that the program works is there's usually a broad theme that every year that students need to base their topics on. And it's so broad that typically just about any topic that a student is interested in, they can fit that into the theme. For example, I think in 2014, when I first came on, it was rights and responsibilities in history. Do you remember any of these?
Yeah, it was rights and responsibilities, revolution, reform one year.
Okay, that was before my time.
Okay, yeah. Good ones in there.
Let's see, leadership and legacy in history, I think it was 2015. And in 2015, you actually went on to the national contest. How many times were you at the national contest?
4 times, I believe.
4 times? Okay.
I believe so.
You were invited to the national contest because this program is a tiered contest system. So believe it or not, Avery, we actually have regional contests now. So
I know that happened right after I left, I think.
Yes. It was a long time coming, and we definitely needed it there. So we actually have 3 regional contests in the state where a certain percentage of students are then invited to the state contest and the statewide contest, which is held at the University of Maine in Orono. And then the top 2 winners from each category, either group or individual, are then invited to go down to the national contest to compete against students from across the country and even internationally. And so you went down 4 times, and in 2015, you had the honor of representing Maine and presenting your work at the Smithsonian. And then you were also, let's see, I actually got a picture. So let's pull this picture up here first. This is you at the Smithsonian of, what is it, the History of America, what is it? Do you remember the name of the museum? It's like,
the Museum of American History.
Museum of American History, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is you presenting at the Museum of American History, speaking with the public there, talking about your exhibit, and you were chosen to represent Maine there that year. And then that same year, you were also at the national contest awarded Outstanding Affiliate Award. So you were the top ranking project in the state for, I believe, the senior category that year, right? And then in 2017, I was lucky enough to work with you as you were my co-coordinator for the day at the state contest. And this is you arranging some of the medals, getting ready for the award ceremony as well. And that is one of my favorite things about being a coordinator, and especially on contest day, is being able to work with one of our alum or someone who has been successful, and they get to be behind the scenes a little bit and see how the NHD sausage is made and how the contest is run. And so it's always a fun day to have someone back there with me helping us out. So I have some questions for you. Let me see if I now just lost them all. I think the first one's going to be pretty easy. If you want to give us a little bit of background information about yourself, that'd be great. I did mention that you graduated from Gorham High School, but where have you gone off to college?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated from Gorham in 2017. Then I went off to Yale, where I studied political science and Russian and Eastern European studies. Currently unenrolled. I'm taking a bit of time off because of Corona. Didn't really want to do the whole online Zoom classes thing. So took some time off and took a full-time position on a political campaign on an election reform issue that I've been working on for almost 5 years now, and living out in California and doing Zoom meetings and having a great time.
So how did you get involved with that campaign, that specific campaign out in California?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. So this is actually what I did right when I finished National History Day. I really loved the research component of National History Day and really fell in love with kind of getting into the nitty gritty, especially at the legal aspect. And a lot of my projects tended to kind of fall back to the laws and creating that portion of change. And so I started getting involved with like my local school board, and one of the school board members, I was on the school board, and one of the other school board members happened to be my neighbor, who also was the campaign manager for the ranked choice voting campaign in Maine. Offered to take me on as an intern. Absolutely loved it, and have been with ranked choice voting in various capacities for almost 5 years now.
Wow. And so what type of things were you doing for that campaign in Maine?
So when I was, yeah. So when I was originally brought on, didn't really know much about campaigns, was trying a bunch of things out. I did a little bit of legal research, did a little bit of like promotional things. Now I'm the digital coordinator for the Massachusetts campaign, where I primarily do digital event creation and like PR type stuff for the campaign.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you mentioned that the research aspect of it kind of got you involved with that. How has that research aspect really helped you with the campaigns that you've been working on?
Research is absolutely the most important thing I learned how to do in high school. It's the reason I have a job today. For a little bit of context, so after the 2016 campaign ended in Maine, I actually was offered a job as a researcher, kind of on a consultant basis, who is my current boss in the campaign world. So kind of my bread and butter of campaign work tends to be the research side, and really the most important thing that I learned was how to really get into the details and notice every single little tiny thing that could possibly come up. And that's something that has ended up being very, very valuable for me. And of course, in politics, every little thing matters. So that's something that I use a lot.
Well, that's great. It's fantastic. I'm sure it can't be the easiest thing right now, working on the campaign sometimes. I'm sure there's a lot of tension out there right now.
Yeah, it's an odd time for politics, but it's an exciting time for politics, and we're certainly living through a very historic election for so many reasons. And so it's a good time to be right in the middle of it and seeing how it's done. So.
And it's nice to have the younger generation participating in it as well. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
This is definitely, as annoying as it is to be on Zoom all of the time and all digital, it's really opening up a lot of new doors for digital organizing and youth engagement in ways that we haven't really seen in the past. And a lot of my job right now is kind of looking at new ways we can get people plugged into campaigns who wouldn't normally be plugged in, and trying to get a lot more younger voters and college students and things like that involved.
Does that go beyond social media?
So social media is by far our biggest kind of boon right now. It's just everyone's on social media all of the time, even more now because of Corona. But we are doing events and things like that to try to still have digital presence in a non-social media way, but
Yeah.
the bulk of that ends up running through social media for us.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, thank you for all your work on that. I should ask you some more questions about NHD. I know we could talk about campaigning for the entire time. But I did mention that all your topics did have a theme, and it was all animal rights. So can you kind of walk us through some of the topics that you chose?
Sure. They were definitely pretty obscure. So my sixth grade year, so my first ever year in NHG, and this one I misstated. This one was actually a documentary. I did a documentary my first year. It was out of character for me, but was on a annual dolphin slaughter. So it was a very kind of bloody thing for a sixth grader to be making a documentary on. I did an exhibit about the history of the ASPCA. Then I followed up with a project about the first student to legally refuse dissection in a high school classroom. That one was definitely my favorite project. I had a lot of fun with that one. I think my favorite NHD memory was, so I went to nationals with that one, and the lawyer who I interviewed and was her lawyer for the case was based in DC, so came down to see the exhibit, and I got to meet him in person and everything like that. And that's actually when I really solidified that I wanted to go to law school and really have a really strong understanding of the law. So that's kind of where the legal aspect started for me.
Well, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was. I definitely wasn't expecting him to come down, and he showed up in that big exhibit hall. I was like waiting in front of my exhibit for him, very, very nervous. So it was very fun. And then I had an exhibit on a ruler named Ashoka who promoted vegetarianism in India, so kind of spanned the gamut on those kinds of things.
Did you do one on the electrocution of an elephant?
Yes, yeah, that was my last one. So
Okay.
there was a essentially caught up in the debate between AC and DC current. There's this elephant named Topsy who is a good PR opportunity and was electrocuted on film as well as poisoned and hung at the same time, kind of a triple threat. It's actually one of the earliest pieces of film, and it's preserved. You can look it up on Google. It's weird, but yeah. So that was my last project. So yeah, definitely had kind of a dark twist to animal welfare in all of my projects.
Yeah. So why did you choose exhibits? I mean, apparently the documentary route wasn't for you.
Yeah. I really liked exhibits because I feel like so often as students we end up kind of in front of a computer so often and just writing and reading, and I really loved that part. But the exhibits were fun because it kind of got you away from the computer screen and got the creative piece in there, and you got to really visualize it and make it pretty. And I really enjoyed making things as well. I did another program called Odyssey the Mind that was very hands-on and creative, and this kind of married the two, where I could put in the research and do all of like, the academic pieces that I really loved, but also have kind of the more creative outlet with it as well. I also liked that there was the big exhibit halls and people would walk through and see it. And I, of course, loved the time that I was able to go to the Smithsonian and present in the Smithsonian. It was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that that's the only category that we're allowed to or able to offer the Smithsonian.
Yeah, there's every now and then there's like a documentary or two in there, I think, but it's definitely heavily works a lot better for the exhibits. So
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing that has been added since you've graduated from NHD land is that the African American History Museum now hosts documentaries over there in the Oprah Winfrey Theater, and it's actually pretty cool. So they're actually getting their recognition as well. It's funny you mentioned that I mean, this past year, I mean, we still had a contest, but we had it virtually, of course. So actually working this summer, trying to figure out how we can, standardize and better do this for next year if we have to go virtual again, which is looking like in a lot of states it probably will have to. It's one of those arguments and discussions that we as coordinators have had quite a bit. Is the reason students like exhibits is because of the tactile experience of building it and putting it together, piecing it and going around, and not sitting at a computer and digitizing it. And so it's been a very big challenge for us trying to figure out how exactly we can make an exhibit building experience better for the students in the virtual world. Just you saying that confirms everything that we've been discussing over the last 3 months. So I appreciate that. So you talked about your research and how that's actually helped you in your young career so far. What did your research process look like as a student on one of these projects?
Yeah, so for me, it was really fun because I was one of those kids who just read anything and everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would pick a top, like Google search, pick a topic, find some really like obscure footnote mention to something, and just kind of latch onto it, and then go through like the library database and get reserve every single book that could like possibly relate, and just sit through and read every single thing, pull up quotes from everything, and then after having read everything, would kind of have a pretty good sense of what kind of primary sources were available, where I could find those primary sources, what kind of interview sources would be really useful and also possible to get. So definitely it was for me a pretty good excuse to comb through every possible library in the state.
What were some of the interesting things you found during your research? I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be what you actually put in your project. I mean, I'm sure there's things that you couldn't.
I mean, I think for me as a young student doing research on something like this, I think for me, it was really the interviews that stood out for me, because you could kind of get people to agree to do like an hour-long interview just because they're like, why is this, like, what is National History Day? Why is this student talking about frog dissection? Like, what's going on? So you really got to talk to some pretty interesting people who were kind of just more curious in you than anything else. But it was also really, really fascinating, especially with this one lawyer who could tell you exactly what happened from a firsthand perspective, and honestly, most people hadn't really asked him about it. Like it wasn't a big giant case that he'd been interviewed on national news for multiple times. It was something that I was really asking questions, or at least it felt like to me, that hadn't been asked before, and that was really, really exciting, especially as someone who was still young and in school and very much looking for something to really kind of dig my teeth into.
Oh. Well, what was the process of actually creating the project like for you?
Like the physical
Yeah, the
thing.
physical project.
So I'm a big procrastinator, so I'm not going to lie. I usually had all of my research on everything written, and then about 2 days before, I would have kind of a my blank exhibit and be like, oh, should probably have some things on it. And then it would be 2 days of me frantically gluing and cutting, and then I would probably be still putting it together when I got to the competition. Um,
I actually remember seeing you do that. Yes.
yeah, I had like this whole little like kit of hot glue guns, and um, yeah, I did not budget my time well on putting this together. It was a great time, but yeah, did not budget the time well.
Now, for people who don't know, typically the exhibits are typically on a trifold board, your basic trifold board. But you didn't always do that, right?
Wasn't a big fan of the trifolds. I had a trifold one year, I think. I usually had some sort of like rotating cube, usually with some sort of like videos in there. You have in the National History, you have a very specific word count, and you have a very specific time, like physical space that you're able to fill.
Mm-hmm.
So I would come up with ways to try to kind of maximize the amount of space. So like if you see with this one that's on the screen right now, it's a very specific size so that it fits exactly within the box when it spins. But I got a lot more surface area out of that than some of the trifolds. Um, yeah. So I would usually come up with these pretty elaborate plans and then put them together about 2 days before.
Yeah, and that's actually funny that you mentioned like you get more space to use if you have the rotating ones. That's another discussion we as coordinators have had, is trying to figure out how to do that virtually and everything like that as well.
Yeah.
Um, so you did mention that you did Odyssey the Mind and things like that. How was NHD different from projects such as that, or any of the other type of programs that you would have done in middle school or high school?
Yeah, so I think so Odyssey the Mind, I absolutely love. One of the things about that is it's a very group heavy thing. So you're put in a group, you're with that group for the entire year, everything is done with that group. National History Day for me was really a chance to do something on my own and really see how good my research skills were, how good my writing was, and what I could do completely on my own, which I really enjoyed having kind of the group aspect in one thing and then the individuality on the other. So it also gave me the freedom to really go off on some kind of weird tangents and pick some topics that I probably couldn't have gotten anyone else on board with. But it was a nice break to have something where it was just you could go and do hours of research on your own and see exactly what your own progress is, and at the end of the day it's really just you, and I really enjoyed that piece.
Um, you know, hindsight being 2020. I mean, of course, you did a documentary once. You did exhibits. Is there any other category you wish you would have tried?
Honestly, I liked exhibit. I think if I had done anything else, I probably would have done a paper. And in hindsight 2020, I've written so many papers in the last few years that
Mhm.
I, yeah, I like
Yeah.
the exhibit.
I find it interesting anytime I ask that question to students, even if I'm judging and I'm speaking to a student right in front of their project, and I'll ask, if it's an exhibit, especially if it's an exhibit, I'll ask, is there any other category you would like? It is typically paper for exhibit students. So nobody ever says performance,
I
unless
was never going to be the performance person. Always admired those people, was never going to be that.
yeah. The performances might be a little bit interesting next year, though, because if,
Yeah.
if it's got to be virtual and we have group performances and they've got a social distance, we're actually possibly going to encourage students to use a platform like this, but use it to their advantage. So, I mean, the example I always give is if you're Alice Paul picketing the White House, you could actually put a picture of the White House behind you and things
Yeah.
like that. So it should be some interesting projects that come out next year in the virtual world.
Will definitely be a lot different than,
Oh
but yeah.
yeah. Can you give us some perspective on what maybe some of the biggest stumbling blocks were or learning opportunities that you had throughout the process of creating projects for NHD?
Yeah, I touched on this a bit before, but I think for me as a procrastinator, it was a really good chance to really, and once again, since it was really just me, see firsthand what would happen if I didn't stay on top of the carefully laid schedules that I made for myself, because I never did. And it made me a little bit more, not necessarily better about not putting things off, but more conscious of how realistic time budgeting and realistically what I had to do to come up with a really great project, and the amount of time and effort that had to go into making a good final product. And I think that that's something that has been really great going into college, and having done um, deep deep research projects on my own before college was definitely something that worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah, that's one of the things I always, when I do teacher workshops and things like that, I always try to promote this as this is going to get students career ready and just going to give them some life skills. And actually, I was just thinking about that as you're talking about, working on research projects, even in college now, and how the doing it in high school and middle school has helped you in that. One of the things that I always try to push, and maybe this be interesting to get your perspective, is that it also helps students with their communication skills, not only in writing, but even just speaking, because you're interviewed by judges, but you also have to reach out to archives and libraries and speak with librarians and historians and try to figure out if they have the material that you even need. So has that helped you? I mean, I'm assuming it might have with working on a campaign, right? So
So first on the interview part, I remember my very first NHD interview. I was like absolutely a mess, like was so stressed about it, was absolutely terrified of the idea of it. And having like a couple interviews every year where I would have like a group of judges who were super nice, and really got me more used to not even, I guess sometimes it was public speaking, but speaking in front of people that I didn't know and talking on a subject that I was presenting on was really great, and is something that on a campaign I've definitely done a lot. And um, was good to get some of that practice in middle school, especially because I think a lot of people don't do that kind of thing until you kind of are thrown into college, and then all of a sudden you have to learn this whole new skill set. And that was something that NHG had definitely prepared me on. And then in terms of reaching out to archives and interviewees and things like that, once again, definitely I email random people for papers I'm writing all the time, and it's pretty incredible what you can get back just by being okay with asking literally everyone. And for NHD, I would send out hundreds of emails to people I knew I would never get a response from, but then every now and then you would get someone pretty great.
Yeah, it's quite amazing what students are able to find, who they're able to find, and
Yeah.
who they're able to actually nail down an interview and get some quality information from. It's quite amazing. I'm shocked every year by some project about how they were able to do it. So, is there any, again, hindsight 2020, is there any kind of support or insight that you wish your teacher could have provided you as you to help you through the process? Let's put your teacher on the spot, even though she's not here. Or,
Yeah. I mean, I was very fortunate to have some really great teachers who, even when we didn't always have an official coordinator for Gorham, I had some teachers who just kind of took me under their wing and made sure that everything happened and that I had the support that I needed to get to state and then get to the national level, which was really fantastic. But um, yeah, I think it's a bit of a learning curve because when you're in middle school or even in high school, you aren't writing these big in-depth research projects, and then in NHG you go down, you're really getting into the weeds on things. And I think sometimes teachers don't realize how far their students are going to go in terms of getting down weird rabbit holes and how in-depth and how much of an expert they're going to become on their topics. So I think it's really important for teachers to kind of hold their students to a high standard of you will know everything about this topic because they'll get there. And I think that's one of the really fun parts about NHD.
that's funny that you mentioned that they are the experts. Students really do become the experts about whatever topic it is that they're studying, and that is so true. That is literally what we say to our judges on contest day as they're doing their training. Is we tell them they are the experts. They will know everything about their topic. Even if it's a professor that is studies the same time period as that student or whatever, there's always going to be something where that professor comes back and will say, I didn't even know about this one source here, or something like that. You hear it every year in the judge room. It's quite amazing. So what was one of your favorite parts of what was like your favorite part of the whole NHD experience? Do you have like anything in specific?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about both these, but I think presenting the Smithsonian was pretty incredible. I was living in DC last summer for an internship and would go to that Smithsonian every other week and would just wander around and find like the place where I presented, and that was pretty cool. And then also meeting the lawyer who was one of my sources, who I kind of idolized, was fantastic. I think also in terms of the national contest, having it at the University of Maryland, so close to DC, is a really incredible opportunity. I had never traveled growing up or anything like that, and going to DC for the first time was incredibly eye-opening. DC is still my absolute favorite city in the world, and I've been lots of places now, and nothing has topped DC. And I think getting students out of their home states into the capital and seeing all these historic places that a lot of us are reading and writing about for our projects is a really powerful experience to have as a young student.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I agree. It's so great having the national contest down there near Washington D.C. and it's especially because we're able to set up meetings now with all of our representatives from the state, and
Yeah.
the students are able to go into every year now. We go into Senator King's actual office, and he gives us a nice little discussion about Joshua Chamberlain every year now because he has a bust of Joshua Chamberlain there.
That's another thing you guys started after I left.
Yeah, I apologize. Well, you know what? You make it down to DC. I'm more than happy to have you as my assistant.
Okay.
I don't know if I can pay you, but if you want to be an intern, I'm more than happy to have you down there for a week. So I think that's about all the topics I have. Is there anything else that we didn't cover on NHD that you think we should talk about?
I mean, I think you hit all the big things. it was a really phenomenal program for me growing up. It was something I kind of fell into accidentally. There just happened to be a teacher that mentioned that there's this program. And it kind of snowballed from there. It stayed, even though it stayed a pretty small program at my school, I was frequently the one of maybe 2 or 3 people, or sometimes even the only person from my school coming up. It was still really, really great to go up every year and see all these students who were really passionate about a research topic and had gotten, it was kind of like a, and I say this in the best possible way, but like a meeting of the nerds. And it was like all the cool nerds who would have like these really obscure, fun, like things to talk about, and then wandering around seeing everyone's research was a really cool opportunity to see other people doing stuff that I was doing. And yeah, I think it's an absolutely phenomenal program.
Well, you know, I'm literally going into my 8th season now, getting ready to go into my 8th season as a coordinator here in the state of Maine. And, you know, I'm getting to a point now where I love to meet up with alum from the program and see where they're at and see what they're doing. And it's always great to see how NHD is affected and helped in different ways. And so, there's always some of the cream of the crop that always rise to the top, that you always want to know what's going on and then see how they're doing. And of course, you and a few others that I've reached out to interview I'm glad to see everything is going well for you. And I really do hope that if we do go virtual, I'm assuming you're out in California for a limited time. You're going to come back to the East Coast at some point.
At some point, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see how long. Yeah.
I hope if we go virtually again, that maybe we can have you as a judge this year at one of our regional
Absolutely.
contests.
I would love to come back and judge.
I would love that too. I think that'd be fantastic. But I want to thank you for your time. I'm glad that we were able to catch up a little bit, and it's always, like I said, it's always fun to speak with some NHD alum. So again, good luck with the campaigning, and hopefully you go back to Yale in the spring, hopefully.
I hope so too.
If not, I'm sure you'll get around to it, and you'll get that degree. But yeah. Always happy to talk to you, Avery.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.